Good afternoon, you're watching the English news on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's top stories. 10 years after its inception, March 14 forces announced the formation of a national council comprising of political parties, independents, and civil society activists. More than 215,000 people have been killed in Syria in 4 years of conflict, according to a monitoring group. It says the brutal civil war enters its 5th year. And suicide bombers attack a Christian community in eastern Pakistan, setting off 2 blasts that killed at least 14 and wounded dozens more. The March 14 forces announced the formation of a national council comprising of political parties, independents, and civil society activists following a closed-door conference marking the 10th anniversary of the coalition's birth. We have decided to form a national council comprising of political parties, independents, and civil society activists. A preparatory committee will be tasked with devising a March 14 plan of action for the coming period and to draft the bylaws. The coalition said in a statement recited by former PM Fouad Sanyura after the rally at the Bial Center in Beirut. March 14 General Secretariat Coordinator Faris Souaid said anyone who took part in the conference will be automatically considered a member of the General Assembly of the National Council. The conferee stressed that Lebanon's future belongs to the Lebanese. They cautioned that the Lebanese state can no longer secure the continuity of its institutions and is unable to find solutions. Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun says the agreement that led to the election of Lebanon's former president Michel Sleiman was a mistake that will not be repeated. The MP was speaking. He is the March 8 presidential candidate. He said that only a strong and representative president who is capable of assuming all responsibilities laid out for him could distance Lebanon from the repercussions of regional turmoil. The FPM chief noted that Lebanon should make its own presidential decisions before foreign arrangements are imposed on the country, calling on local parties to open a new page by engaging in meaningful cooperation. He added that in addition to electing a strong president, the protection of Lebanon requires a well-equipped army that is capable of deterring any possible aggression. Aoun's comments were made during an FPM dinner commemorating the anniversary of the 1989 War of Liberation. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai is welcoming talks between Lebanon's rival parties, saying that it is essential to build internal cohesion. During the Sunday sermon, the Patriarch said that dialogue sessions decrease tensions, build internal cohesion, unify the national vision, and preserve the Lebanese model of coexistence. The Patriarch lauded the principles of partnership and coexistence that he said are characteristic of the National Pact, the 1943 agreement between Christians and Muslims that laid the foundation of Lebanon as a multi-confessional state. Lebanese rival political parties have decided to engage in dialogue sessions in light of increased domestic tension and the 10th month presidential impasse. The Free Patriotic Movement and the Lebanese forces are also preparing for highly anticipated talks between FPM Michel Aoun and LF leader Samir Raja. More than 215,000 people have been killed in Syria in 4 years of conflict, a monitoring group says, as the brutal civil war enters its 5th year today. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said it had documented the death of over 215,000 people in Syria since March of 2011, among them more than 66,000 civilians. Some 5,000 people have been killed in the past 5 weeks alone. While civilians account for nearly a third of the deaths, the majority of those killed in the conflict have been combatants. On the government side, more than 46,000 soldiers have been killed, along with more than 30,000 Syrian pro-regime militiamen. In addition, over 3,000 Shia fighters from abroad have been killed in battle alongside regime forces, among them hundreds from Hezbollah movement. Observatory Director Rami Abdurrahman said the figures were almost certainly not complete and that the number could be far more. The U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia says it is suspending consular services in the kingdom for 2 days due to heightened security concerns after warnings of threats against Western oil workers. All services in Riyadh, the capital, and at the consulates in Jeddah and Dhahran have been cancelled for Sunday and Monday. The embassy warned U.S. citizens to take extra precautions and keep a low profile if they are out in public. The embassy on Friday warned that Western oil workers risked being attacked or kidnapped by terrorist groups. Saudi Arabia is taking part in the U.S.-led airstrikes that began in September against ISIS in Syria, raising concerns about possible retaliation. Westerners in Saudi Arabia have come under attack 4 times since October alone. Iranian Foreign Minister Jawad Mohammad Zarif and his delegation arrived in the Swiss city of Lausanne to hold another round of nuclear talks with world powers. Iranian State TV reported that Zarif was going to hold two-way talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry this afternoon. He said there were still outstanding technical issues for which solutions needed to be reached. This comes as Kerry delivered a highly cautious assessment ahead of the next round of nuclear talks with Iran, citing important gaps in the way of a deal before an end of March deadline. All 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, Britain, China, France, Russia, and the United States, leading the negotiations with Iran over its nuclear ambitions, along with Germany, are currently racing to complete the outlines of a deal by the end of this month. They have set the end of June as the deadline for a full agreement. Welcome back. You're watching Future Television in English. Human Rights Watch is warning of the use of cluster bombs over the past 4 months in the Libyan conflict between forces of the North African country's rival governments. There is credible evidence of the use of banned cluster bombs in at least 2 locations in Libya since December of 2014, HW said in a statement released in Beirut. The watchdog, on the basis of telephone interviews with witnesses and photographic evidence, said remnants of cluster bombs were found at Bin Jawad, east of Tripoli, in February and in nearby Sirte in March. The Libyan Air Force of the internationally recognized government has acknowledged that it carried out air raids on the 2 locations, but denied the use of cluster bombs. Steve Goose, the New York-based group's arms director, said most nations have banned these weapons due to their inherently indiscriminate nature and the unacceptable harm they pose to civilians. With opinion polls showing his party holding a narrow but steady lead 2 days before Israel's election, opposition leader Isaac Herzog took his campaign to a central Tel Aviv market, glad handling and haggling with eager stallholders. While the race remains tight before the March 17th vote, the latest survey shows Herzog's center-left Zionist Union winning 24 or 25 seats in the 120-member Knesset, 3 or 4 seats more than Likud, potentially enough to form a coalition. Co-leader of the center-left Zionist Union, Herzog is an Israeli blue blood, a son of a former president, grandson of a renowned rabbi, and nephew of one of Israel's most notable foreign ministers. Despite that, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu initially made hay against him, casting Herzog as weak, soft, and security, and someone who would too readily give up land to the Palestinians. 14 people were killed and more than 70 injured when 2 Taliban suicide bombers attacked churches in Pakistan, sparking mob violence in which 2 other suspected militants died. The bombings occurred during prayers at 2 churches located around half a kilometer apart in the Yuhanabad district of Lahore City, a neighborhood that is home to more than 100,000 Christians, according to officials. Zahid Pervez, the top health official in Lahore, confirmed the death toll and told reporters that 78 people were wounded in both attacks. Broken window panes, blood, and shoes were scattered across the blast sites. The Pakistani Taliban's Jamaat al-Uhar faction described the blast as suicide attacks and vowed to continue their campaign for the enforcement of Sharia Islamic law in a statement emailed to the media. A bus carrying about 50 passengers plunged down into a deep ravine in the mountains of southeast Brazil, killing at least 40 people on board. A police colonel told local media that at least 12 injured people were rushed to nearby hospitals. Police said the accident happened late on Saturday in a mountainous area of Santa Catarina state. Police believe the driver may have lost control on a curve and the bus plunged into a ravine 400 meters deep. Residents in the tiny South Pacific archipelago of Vanuatu continue to take stock of the damage brought by Cyclone Pam. Structural damage across Port Vila was extensive, with the majority of homes severely damaged or destroyed, according to local officials. Some residents began cleaning up what was left of their wrecked houses and checking on family members. Officials said relief workers, meanwhile, were trying to get temporary shelters to victims as fast as possible. Many people who have ventured out from 23 emergency shelters around Port Vila have found their homes damaged or blown away altogether, officials at World Vision said. The government declared a state of emergency across the country, and Australia and New Zealand sent in relief supplies. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. 10 years after its inception, March 14, forces announced the formation of a national council comprising of political parties, independents, and civil society activists. More than 215,000 people have been killed in Syria in 4 years of conflict. The monitoring group says that the brutal civil war enters its 5th year. Suicide bombers attack a Christian community in eastern Pakistan, setting off 2 blasts that killed at least 14 and wounded dozens more. Those are your headlines live on Future Television. I'm Nina Nelfred signing off. Have a good week ahead.